I refuse to accept family meetings because I'm tired of having to pay for the entire family. When my partner and I first stepped into what would become our new home, it felt like all of our efforts had finally paid off. We had spent years saving, budgeting, and meticulously planning for this day. And there it was, a stunning 3-bedroom home with a huge kitchen, a sprawling living room, and a backyard that seemed to go on forever. It was the type of setting that demanded to be filled with joy, memories, and life. We had always envisioned a room like this where we could organize events, bring our families together, and possibly even start new traditions. We don't have children and don't want to have any in the future, so our home was ours to shape and build whatever life we desired within. I used to be a bartender and I've always enjoyed entertaining. There's something about getting people together, creating the ideal cocktail or meal, that makes me happy. So, when Thanksgiving neared last year, it seemed only right that I would offer to host. It was the first major holiday in our new house, and I wanted it to be memorable. I imagined our family gathered around the table, the home smelling of roasting turkey and freshly made pies, and the sounds of laughter and clinking glasses ringing down the halls. It was a wonderful vision, and I was determined to make it a reality. When the big day arrived, our house was converted into a cozy, welcoming haven. The kitchen was a hive of activity as I juggled various dishes, timed everything correctly, so that it all came together just in time for supper. The living room was set up with comfortable seating, and I had even created a small bar area where I could mix beverages for our visitors. The table was set with our finest china, and the centerpiece was a stunning arrangement of fall flowers that I had lovingly selected. As our family began to arrive, I could feel the excitement grow. They marveled at the house and complimented us on how we had personalized it. The accolades flowed as readily as the wine and cocktails, and I found myself reverting to my former bartending ego, mixing drinks with flair and ensuring everyone was taken care of. Dinner was a success, the food was wonderful, and the conversation was engaging. There was laughing and there were stories. And there was that obvious sense of community that makes holidays like Thanksgiving so memorable. By the end of the night, as the last of our guests said their goodbyes and the house fell silent, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment. Hosting Thanksgiving had exceeded all of my expectations. It was a lot of work, but it was rewarding to see everyone pleased and know that I had produced a memorable experience for my family. I was tired, certainly. But it was the nice kind of fatigue, the kind that comes after a productive day. But as the weeks passed into months, I realized Thanksgiving had established a pattern. With Christmas approaching, my family figured we'd host again. After all, our home was the ideal meeting place, and we had demonstrated that we could handle it. I didn't mind if the first Christmas was another chance to bring everyone together, and I still felt good about hosting after Thanksgiving. So, we resumed our preparations. Christmas was far more lavish than Thanksgiving. There were gifts to buy and package, a tree to adorn, and an even more ambitious menu to prepare. I spent days baking cookies, creating sweets, and putting together a feast that would make even Santa jealous. We hosted a Christmas Eve dinner and a Christmas Day brunch, and our home was once again filled with the holiday spirit. However, after Christmas, things began to alter. My mother's birthday was in February, and once again, our home was the designated location. This time, I had a sense of trepidation. We had recently hosted 2 major holidays consecutively, and I was beginning to feel the strain. But I ignored those sentiments and plunged myself into preparing her birthday party. It was a modest gathering, but it still needed a lot of effort to decorate, prepare, and clean. By the time her birthday was over, I was exhausted. As the year progressed, it became evident that our house had become the primary place for all family meetings. Every holiday, birthday, and family function took place at our house, including Easter, Memorial Day, and the 4th of July. And with each gathering, the load became heavier. It wasn't only the time and effort required to prepare, cook, and clean up after these parties, there was also financial burden. Hosting wasn't inexpensive. We were spending hundreds, if not thousands, of dollars on food, beverages, and decorations, only to hire cleaners later since the mess was simply too much for us to handle on our own. Sure, some family members might help out here and there, but the majority of the obligation always fell on my partner and me. And while everyone else was able to unwind and enjoy the parties, I was continuously on my feet, ensuring that everything ran properly. I was the one who got up before early to start the prep work, the last to retire to bed once the home was silent and the last dish was washed. My partner assisted whenever he could, but I could tell he was feeling the pressure as well. These events took up most of our weekends, leaving little time for us to relax and do the things we enjoyed. The financial load began to weigh heavily on us. Yes, we both make good money, but that doesn't mean we want to spend a large chunk of it on hosting. We each have our own objectives and dreams about saving for retirement. Traveling, possibly launching a tiny side business, and spending so much money on these gatherings began to feel like a drain on our resources. More importantly, it was time. We could have spent more time together, exploring new places, experiencing new things, or simply relaxing at home, but the never-ending cycle of family reunions had taken over. The final straw came when Thanksgiving approached again this year. My memories of last year's holiday were still vivid: the excitement, joy, and satisfaction. However, instead of being excited to host, I had a tremendous sense of dread. I couldn't do it anymore, not like this. The prospect of going through all of that trouble again, of spending weeks planning, cooking, and cleaning, just to have our home invaded by the pandemonium of another family gathering, was too much. One Sunday afternoon, I decided to speak with them about it. On a family video call, it had become customary for us to check in with each other every weekend to catch up on life and arrange for future events. My mother, siblings, and a couple of relatives were all present, laughing and chatting as we discussed Thanksgiving plans. "So, we'll be at your place again, correct?" my mother inquired, her tone light and nonchalant, as if it were an obvious conclusion. I took a deep breath to prepare myself for what I was going to say. "Actually, I wanted to talk to you all about it," I started, my voice unsteady. "This past year, we've hosted many parties, including Thanksgiving, Christmas, Mom's birthday, Easter, Memorial Day, and the 4th of July. It's been great having everyone over, but it's starting to get a little overwhelming for us." There was a pause, a momentary hush on the other end of the phone line, as my words hung in the air. I could see their bewildered expressions and small furrows of forehead as they absorbed what I was saying. "What do you mean?" my mother finally asked, her voice laced with confusion. "I mean, it takes a lot of work to arrange all of these events," I explained, trying to maintain a calm and even tone. "The planning, cooking, and cleaning are starting to take their toll on us. It also has a significant financial impact. We are spending a lot of money on food, beverages, and decorations, and then we have to hire cleaners since we can't handle it all on our own." I stopped, thinking they'd understand and comprehend where I was coming from. But instead of sympathy or understanding, I received mockery. "You are joking, right?" My brother chuckled and shook his head. "You have the largest house out of all of us. It's ideal for a family holiday. What's a little effort compared to that?" "Yeah, and you're really excellent at it," my cousin joined in, smiling. "When you host, everything always works out well. We're all looking forward to it." I felt my heart fall. They didn't take me seriously. They assumed I was exaggerating, making a huge issue out of nothing. I looked over at my partner, who gave me a comforting gesture and quietly encouraged me to stand my ground. "It's not just a little work," I asserted, my voice firming. "It is a lot of labor. Not only does it take time and effort, but it also costs money. We've spent hundreds, if not thousands of dollars on these meetings. We enjoy having you all over, but we need a break. We can't continue doing this for every holiday and birthday, it's too much." Again, there was an awkward stillness. I could see the perplexity turn to aggravation on their expressions, as if they didn't understand why I was raising this matter. My mother eventually spoke up. Her tone was less cheerful and more serious. "Honey, I understand that it is a lot of effort, but we are family. We help each other out. You and your partner do not have children, thus it is easier for you. You know, the rest of us face our own set of issues." Her statements caused me to feel frustrated. Yes, we do not have children, but that does not make our time and energy any less precious. It did not imply that we were free to be the default hosts for every event. But I could see where this was headed. My family had convinced themselves that our circumstances made us the finest candidates to host, and they were not about to give up that belief easy. "I understand that everyone faces unique obstacles," I continued, attempting to maintain a calm voice. "However, that does not mean we can continue to do this alone. That's why I propose we alternate hosting duties. That way, everyone shares the load and no one needs to carry it entirely on their own. Or if that is too complex, we may meet in a restaurant or a rental facility. That way, we can still be together without putting all of the burden on one home." My brother rolled his eyes. "Come on, everyone knows it's simpler at your place. You have the space, the kitchen, and the setup. Why complicate things beyond what is necessary?" "Yeah, and dining out isn't the same," my cousin explained. "It doesn't feel the same. You know, it's less personal." I began to feel like I was bashing my head against a wall. No matter how I explained it, they refused to see things my way. It seemed as if they had already determined that hosting was my duty, and any attempt to change that was simply me being difficult. The tension in the air was palpable following that exchange. My family had made it known that they didn't like the notion of rotating hosting chores, despite my best efforts to emphasize how overwhelmed we were. It appeared that they still didn't realize how much effort went into hosting every single holiday and event. I was intellectually and emotionally exhausted, and I knew my spouse felt the same way. Despite this, I could tell they were not going to give up. The unspoken expectation lingered, heavy and oppressive, like a dark cloud above us. A few days later, I received confirmation that I had been draining. My mom sent a group text saying that the next holiday event, Thanksgiving no less, will be hosted at our house. When I read the message, my heart plummeted, and I felt a mixture of frustration and resignation. The note read, "We've all talked about it, and we believe it is ideal to keep Thanksgiving at your place. I swear that we will all help out more this time. We can't wait to be together." The remarks stung worse than they should have. It wasn't that I didn't want to be with my family, I adored them, despite our differences, but I felt like they were entirely disregarding whatever I said. It seemed as if my worries and boundaries had been brushed aside, treated as a little nuisance. I showed my companion the note, which he read with a scowl. "They aren't listening," he said, expressing the obvious. I know, I groaned and sank into the couch next to him. I do not know what else to do. They're simply so adamant that we're the default hosts because we don't have kids. It's as if they don't value our time and energy. He wrapped an arm around me, bringing me closer. He advised that we simply reject. I contemplated it, but I knew it would simply result in more stress and disputes. My family was stubborn, and they were not going to give up quickly. Plus, part of me was concerned about the consequences. What if they truly became upset with me, causing a schism between us? "I believe I have a better idea," I said after a time, as a thought formed in my head. "They want to celebrate Thanksgiving at our house, which is okay, but I won't be cooking anything. If they wish to use our residence, they can take care of everything else themselves." He lifted an eyebrow, obviously curious. "Are you sure about that? They might not take it well." "I'm confident," I said, my resolve solidifying in my chest. "They must recognize that hosting is more than just having a large house, it is also about the effort that goes into it. Perhaps if they experience what it's like to show up with nothing prepared, they'll finally get it." So, that was the plan. I'd host Thanksgiving, but I wouldn't cook anything. No cleaning, cooking, or setting the table. It was a hazardous move, but I believed it was the only way to convey my message. I needed to show them that hosting wasn't as simple as they thought. The days leading up to Thanksgiving were filled with an unusual mix of excitement and dread. My family kept sending texts, casually asking if I needed help with anything, or if I had planned the food yet. Each time I responded with vague, non-committal answers, attempting to avoid their questions. They clearly thought that everything would be the same as it usually was, a lavish feast and a beautifully decorated home, with all the extras that made our celebrations so memorable. But I wouldn't budge. I refused to get stuck in the same old routine. This year they were going to experience what it was like to take things for granted. Thanksgiving morning dawned, and for the first time in years, I awoke without feeling fear. There was no rush to get the turkey into the oven, no frenetic scramble to prepare side dishes, and no stress about setting the table perfectly. I felt strangely relaxed, knowing that I had done exactly as I had stated. I would do nothing. My girlfriend and I spent the morning lying about the house, appreciating the peace and quiet. We had a basic breakfast, watched TV, then went for a walk. It felt almost strange, as if we were getting a taste of what a truly relaxed vacation could be like. By the time my family arrived in the early afternoon, I could tell they were confused. They walked inside. They expected to be greeted by the familiar warm, inviting smells of Thanksgiving dinner, but instead were faced with nothing. The kitchen was quiet, the dining room table was empty, and there was not a single dish in sight. Where is the food?" my brother questioned, glancing around as if he had overlooked something apparent. I gave him a careless shrug and did not do anything. He glanced at me, evidently anticipating the joke. "What do you mean, you didn't make anything?" "It's Thanksgiving, I know," I said, maintaining a bland tone. "But I told you that I needed a break, so I did not cook." As the rest of my family took in the scene, they began to realize what was happening. My mother was unusually agitated, her eyes darting over the room, as if trying to figure out how everything had gone so wrong. Her voice was filled with astonishment. "You made nothing at all?" "Nope," I replied, shaking my head. "I intended what I said. If everyone wants to utilize our house, that's okay. But I am not cooking this year. I needed a break. Remember?" There was startled quiet as they processed what I had just spoken. My brother exchanged looks with my cousin, and I could see the displeasure in his eyes. "So what should we do now?" he asked. His voice rose with frustration. "We don't have any food, nothing. How are we expected to spend Thanksgiving?" I could feel the tension rise in the room, but I refused to back down. "I don't know," I replied, crossing my arms, "but I am confident you will work something out. If you need supplies, you can go to the grocery shop down the street or order takeout. Whatever works for you." My mom appeared to be on the edge of tears. I was plainly overwhelmed by the circumstances. "I can't believe that," she said, shaking her head. This is not like you. You've always been the one who brings us all together. I felt a stab of shame at her remarks, but I brushed it off. I knew if I caved now, nothing would change. My family needed to understand that they couldn't keep expecting me to shoulder all of the duty with no regard for how it affected me. My voice softened somewhat, but I had to do it. I needed you to see what it's like when I'm not taking care of everything. My family held a protracted, awkward position as they processed my remarks. Finally, my brother gave an annoyed groan. Fine, he responded, evidently agitated. Let's go get some food. We will work it out. The following hour was a hectic scramble as my family crowded into their cars and drove to the food store. They returned with bags of prepared meals, rotisserie chickens, and whatever else they could get on such short notice. It was far from our typical extravagant spread, but it was better than nothing. As they scrambled to put everything together, I watched from the sidelines, feeling an odd combination of satisfaction and grief. Part of me felt relieved that I had finally taken a stand, that I had forced them to experience what it was like to be in my shoes, but another part of me felt a tremendous sense of loss. This wasn't the Thanksgiving I had imagined, and it wasn't the holiday I wanted for my family. When everything was ready, we sat down to eat. The atmosphere was tight, weighted with unspoken resentment. The cuisine was decent, but it lacked the warmth and caring that we expected from our dinners. My family ate in relative silence, apparently absorbing what had occurred. My mother called me aside as we were cleaning up after supper. She appeared exhausted, her countenance a mix of sadness and anxiety. I apologize, she said, her voice quiet. I didn't realize we were placing so much strain on you. We're so used to you handling everything. I suppose we took it for granted. I felt a knot grow in my throat at her remarks, but I was able to keep my emotions under control. I understand, Mom, I replied. But I couldn't keep doing everything by myself. I needed you all to see that. She nodded, her eyes filled with a mixture of understanding and remorse. We'll work something out for the next time, she murmured. But I hope you won't do this again. It was incredibly hard on everyone. Next time, we need to have a serious conversation about how we're going to manage these gatherings, I added, my voice stern. If we're going to continue celebrating together, we must all share the responsibility. Otherwise, I won't host again. Not like this. She looked at me for a long moment, as if searching for something in my expression. Finally, she sighed and gave a small nod. Okay, she said quietly, we'll talk about it. As we finished cleaning up and everyone started to leave, I felt a strange sense of relief wash over me. It hadn't been the perfect solution, but it was a start. My family had been forced to confront the reality of what hosting meant, and while they hadn't fully accepted it yet, I knew that I had made my point. The next few weeks were filled with a strange tension. My family was clearly still processing what had happened, and I could sense that they were trying to figure out how to move forward. I received a few messages here and there. Tentative offers to host future gatherings or suggestions to meet at a neutral location. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. As the next holiday approached, I braced myself for the inevitable conversation. I knew my family would be looking to me for answers, for guidance on what to do next, but this time I was ready. I had learned that sometimes in order to make a change, you had to be willing to stand your ground, even if it meant disappointing the people you love. When the text finally came asking what the plan was for the holiday, I took a deep breath and replied, let's talk. We need to figure out a new plan, together. So here I am, caught between the desire to please my family and the need to protect my own well-being. Enough for refusing to host family gatherings anymore. For wanting to share the load. To reclaim our time and our space. It's a difficult position to be in, and I never thought it would come to this.